The American Civil War, a conflict that a lot of people talk about, not now anymore, but it's a conflict that will live in across all of American legend. But it was a conflict that after 2 to 3 years, it was a foregone conclusion that the Union was going to win. But what if the conflict was, well, a bit more than that, something more chaotic than the one we saw in our timeline? So, today in this video, I will show you the Civil War, a civil war that causes the Union to collapse. So, first, I will make some changes to the best of my ability that are going to teeter on the edge of being insane to mostly realistic. I cannot guarantee full realism, I'm not a historian, but I could do my best. So the first point of divergence is two things. Washington, George Washington, the first president, we all know him, we all love him, was a opponent of slavery, but he never really showed it. So in this timeline, Washington's going to be more open about his disdain for slavery. And two, the cotton gin, which was a machine that made slavery more profitable, is not going to be invented in this timeline. The reason I made these changes is to weaken the plantation class so they don't interfere with changes we will get into later. With Washington going against slavery, meaning that his countrywide cult of personality means the slave owners and their little, they're not gonna have, they're gonna have little justification and public support. And with the cotton gin never being invented, making slavery unprofitable as the cotton gin increases cotton production, which makes harvesting cotton more of a cash crop. Plantation owners more rich and powerful, and slavery more effective and profitable. These changes massively affect the South and the Civil War, as the South can have a better chance at industrializing, having a better chance of fighting the Union, which makes the possibility of the Civil War being less of a foregone conclusion. And also could cause to be, let's just say, a bit more longer and brutal, or shorter and more chaotic. But also, this causes a problem. The Civil War could not happen as slavery is not a hot topic to cause a civil war. Now, I think that I do actually forgot to mention this. I do think that sharecropping would probably still exist as a substitute. I don't think they're gonna let go of that and give blacks rights, but I don't think it's gonna be enough to cause an outright civil war. But you know what is a hot topic in the 1860s? That's right, state rights. So I'll make one more change and that will be the 1860 Republican nomination, in which John C. Fremont wins the 1860 election with William L. Dayton as vice president. The reason why I picked John C. Fremont is that he was known for being very autocratic in his military career and being so hated by the South so much that they said they would rebel if he won the election. So it's 1860, and South Carolina and 6 other states secede as they fear the autocratic ways will make him move to restrict their state rights. And the Southern elite's way of life is threatened as the Democrats are not elected and cannot protect them. John C. Fremont would send an ultimatum to the seceding states, which would now include North Carolina, Tennessee, Arkansas, Virginia, and Kentucky. This ultimatum would be thrown away after the Battle of Fort Sumter. The Union would have a harder time beating the Confederates as they are more industrialized, and the Union and its army being under John C. Fremont. The Union war effort would be disastrous, as John C. Fremont wasn't a good planner. He would make hasty decisions without telling anyone, and his corruption would not help. They even called his army a gang of bandits. This was on full display in real life when he was in command of the West forces in the Civil War. And he was even, for these actions, like, sacked by Lenin. Abraham Lincoln, I mean. While in contrast, the Confederacy would have a better campaign than the North, obviously, as the CSA main objective was to defend their territory and independence from the Union. The John C. Fremont Stalin-like charges does a lot of damage to the areas under their occupation and being invaded by the Union, but after the Confederate counterattacks, they would achieve their goal. Let's get into that. When the Union did a massive offensive from Missouri, Kentucky, Virginia, Texas, and the Arizona and Indian territories, the Confederates were suffering massive casualties and were getting desperate and needed manpower. So General Patrick Cleburne met with John Longstreet and Robert E. Lee, in which he calls to allow blacks into the Confederate Army to solve the manpower issue, with the reward of giving the blacks more rights. After going through their limited options, the generals agreed to the plan, and they put it through the Secretary of War, George W. Randolph, and President Jefferson Davis. George W. Randolph agrees, while Jefferson Davis disagrees, saying that the blacks were incompetent and untrustworthy. The generals would see Jefferson Davis as being a liability, as he is blocking necessary reform that could help the Confederacy in the long run and could save Confederate territory. General Patrick Cleburne plans a coup with the help of the Tennessee Army and succeeds in taking over the Confederate Congress. He places George W. Randolph as acting president, as he was the only secretary to agree with Clubbock's military reform plan. Generals like Robert E. Lee would have concerns over Clubbock's coup, but he assures them that it's necessary to win the war and has promised to bring back democracy after the war's end. After making segregated black units, Cleburne plans a counterattack to gain back northern Kentucky. He manages to win and gain back northern Kentucky and takes important cities like Lexington, Louisville, and the state capital, Frankfort. This would prove Cleburne right and be confrontable with, and generals would be comfortable with Cleburne's rule and having blacks in the army. After the Kentucky offensive, the Confederate Army moves its forces to the block attacks from the Union. The Confederacy would lose the Arizona territory, unfortunately or fortunately, whether you like the Confederacy or not. After 3 years of incumbent Union generals bashing their heads in, civil discontent, brutal offenses, the election of 1864 was around the corner, and knowing that he would not win re-election, John C. Fremont would cancel the 1864 election and declare martial law. This would be his worst mistake. This decision would cause riots across the nation, which would lead to John C. Freedford being deposed by General Henry S. Sherman, Henry Halleck, and Ulysses S. Grant. They made a coalition government to stabilize the Union war effort, but John C. Fremont would escape to the west and take control of California and the territories of the Great Plains, and breaking off to make the U.S. emergency government of the Western Territories. Due to the coalition government not restoring elections, the North Atlantic states would secede from the Union. This would lead to another civil war between the U.S. coalition government, the emergency government, and the seceding Atlantic states, now called the American Republic, under Governor Edward D. Morgan. the Union has collapsed and the hopes of uniting the Union has gone with it. Things would get worse as the U.S. emergency government would collapse, which caused the Wild West to actually be wild. The coalition government would also collapse after three generals' disagreements intensified, as Sherman wanted to continue a fight with the Confederates, but Henry Haylock disagreed as he wanted to fight the Atlantic secessionists. But Ulysses S. Grant wanted to make peace with the American Republic and reunite them as he wanted to bring back democracy. The American Republic is the only one standing and has gained more land as Ulysses S. Grant's faction joined them. The collapse would play in the hands of the Confederacy, as the collapse would basically spell victory for the Confederates. Now, with the Union gone and the war over, the Confederates can focus on rebuilding and improving itself. Patrick Cleburne would stick to his word and restore the Confederate Congress as it was intended, but with more military influence. Early elections held between James Longstreet running for the Whigs and Judah P. Benjamin as running mate, and John C. Brickand running for the Democrats, with his running mate being Richard Hawes. Due to Longstreet's popularity and John C. Brickand's past failures, like the 1860 election, and his lack of popularity, he loses, and Longstreet wins in a landslide victory. Now the president, Longstreet must deal with the Confederate economic recession after the war and the growing instability in the Confederacy as political divisions rise after the CSA's uniting force, the Union, is gone. The American Republic, with the help of Ulysses S. Grant, would unite the Midwest and continue to the Mississippi River, I mean. The Republic would have an election in 1866 between Abraham Lincoln running for the Republicans with Hamilton Hamlet as his vice, and the Democrats with George Bancroft and his vice being Robert Anderson. The Republicans win as the Democrats lost their main support base, the South, and the Northern Democrats are not popular in the North. Abraham Lincoln and his cabinet must look after a battered nation and fix not only the nation, but the people's spirit. This is where I leave off this scenario here. Thank you for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe if you want to see more. I don't know. That's your choice. Bye. Stick out.